Alrighty. So good morning. I'm Claire. I'm the Assistant Curator of Education and Outreach at the Zimmerli Art Museum. And I'm here with my friend Yasmin, who is a museum educator. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about some still lifes, and that is our art project of the day. So we thought it would be neat to look at a couple pictures of still lifes from the museum's collection, just so you can get an idea of the variety of artistic styles that go into making a still life. And you can try to imitate one of them with your drawing, or you can draw in your own style, whatever works for you. It's a very informal, drop in, stay as long as you like program. So yeah, whatever works for you. So let me, and I did want to remind you all that it is easier if you're all on mute, but you can obviously unmute yourself if you have a question, or you can raise your hand if you want as well, either physically or on video in your little box. There's a way to do that. Or you can write to me in the chat, because I'll be monitoring that once Yasmin is doing the drawing activity. All right, so let me share my screen. All righty. So here is our first still life example from the collection, appropriately called Still Life with Fruit. So this is a really nice one to teach from, because there's so many different ways you can take it in terms of your observations. So obviously, the arrangement of fruit to talk about, like, that's really fun to talk about, especially with preschoolers and kindergartners, finding out what their favorite fruit is, maybe what fruit they don't like. But also, with older audiences, talking about the composition and foreground, middle ground, background, light and shadow. So there's a lot to unpack, but it is a pretty crowded still life. So, don't feel like yours would have to look anything like this with all the layering and different textures. I know for me that would be quite difficult. But this is a pretty traditional image as far as still lifes go. And this is on view currently, if we were open, in our American gallery. This next image is also in our American gallery, a Dorothy Daner still life from 1932. And this is definitely more of an abstract still life. There's still some fruit, kind of like in the first one, but the bananas have some texture to them. And toward the side, there's either a piece of bread or a pineapple. It's up to you what you decide it is. I've heard about half and half. But then you can also see there's a teapot, there's a water pitcher. Perhaps these objects are set on a table, maybe a windowsill. It's kind of hard to see, the way that they're arranged. What's in front, what's in the back, are things on top of each other? It's harder to unpack visually than the still life with fruit that we saw before. But I do feel like if I were to draw a still life, mine would sort of come out more like this, just having objects sort of placed on top of each other. But I do like this one because it does incorporate texture and decorative objects as well. And our last one is called Restaurant Diner Still Life 4, and that's by George Siegel from 1984. It's not currently on view, although one of his sculptures of a still life with fruit is on view in our American gallery. But I chose this one because it does give you a good sense of what it takes to create a drawing. You can see all of, if you look here, you can see all of the lines and scribbles and squiggles that he used to make certain parts of the picture darker and certain parts of the picture lighter. You can see what looks like a salt shaker, maybe some ketchup, and a container of sugar. Those are all found at the diner. And Maybe they're up in front of a menu or something like that, but everything is recognizable even though it's in black and white. So this is a good, I think, segue to start our still life drawings. And Yasmin will guide you through the process, first by arranging your objects, and then, you know, working kind of like George Siegel and making your own outlines and light and shadow markings in black and white with your pencil. So Yasmin, I will turn it over to you. And if anyone has questions, I will be in the chat. Here is just a quick list of supplies that you'll need for the activity. If you haven't seen them in the email, they're here for you. So take a minute, run around and grab some things if you haven't gotten them already, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Claire, for, oh, there we go. Hope everyone can hear me. Thank you so much. My name is Yasmin, and today we're going to be focusing on still life, as Claire has told us. Still life, I think, is a very interesting subject. You see it a lot in museums, art museums when you go. It's a favorite. It's a very simple thing to do at home as well for us home artists. I've picked 3 objects that I had in my house. So I have an orange, an apple, and this little teacup that I found. All 3 of them have slightly different textures, slightly different colors. So I think it'll be an interesting drawing. If you can use anything that you want to. I've used fruit in this cup. You can pick a toy. You can pick any sort of glassware, anything that you want to set up, and then find a spot for it that you think will be the easiest to draw from. And maybe something that has light, so you can have some light and shadow as well. Okay. And hope everyone has some paper. I'm starting with just a blank piece of paper. Actually, I started my drawing already. And a pencil. I have an eraser. I have a pencil sharpener just to make sure I'm ready to go. We'll give everyone a minute to get their items. If you want to start your drawing as well, my recommendation and what I do, especially for things like this, I start by blocking out basic shapes. So obviously the orange and the apple have some sort of circular aspects to them. So I think that that makes it easier to start a drawing. I think starting a drawing is usually one of the toughest parts of things. So if you start out by doing shapes, obviously the cup is sort of cylindrical. You can do that as well. And then, I'm always looking back at my objects, making sure, did I make one object slightly too big? I can always grab my eraser, redraw it. It's a very simple drawing so far. I'm just going to show it to you. And I'm going to start after I have my shapes. You can even put in a background. So I put in a couple lines, I don't know if you can see them, on the side. So you can see my objects are resting on a surface. In this case, it's a table. And once I have that ready, I'm going to start doing some shading. I can do it with my pencil. If you prefer, you can also start with any sort of colored material. So I have colored pencils as well. I have a collection ready to go. You can start blocking and shading with colored pencil. I prefer to do it with a regular pencil to start with, and then I'll go in with my colored pencils. So if everyone can see this, I'm going to start shading my drawing. And it's one of the things that I like about still life is that once you're done with your drawing, not everyone's going to be able to see your objects. So if it's a little different, if you decide to make some other choices as you're making your drawing, you can change colors later on. It's your choice. It's your artistic ability sort of showing through in your drawing. You have a lot of free reign with this. And let's see, I'm going to do a shadow here. And I'm going to do can be very rough at first, and then as you get more comfortable with your materials, it starts refining your drawing a little bit more. Sometimes that's when I notice that my shapes might be a little wonky and my lines maybe aren't the best, and then I can start fixing it and sort of making sure that it's looking more how I want it to look. I always find it best to start with sort of thinner, lighter lines because they're easier to erase. That way you have a better idea of what you're doing, and then if you don't like it, you erase and start again. Whereas if you start out with the thicker, dark lines, those can be a little harder to get rid of and sort of erase. But once you have an idea of what you want, you can start blocking in shapes, making sure it's very visible and there's maybe some contrast. And we're going to do that also with our shadow. Okay. If anyone has any questions throughout this process, maybe they want some help with a shape or any sort of shading, feel free to pause me or raise your hand, ask any questions that you'd like. If I'm going too fast, please let me know. I will slow down. If I'm going too slow, let me know and I can speed up as well.
That's great advice, Yasmin, especially since we're such a small group. I think, yeah, if you need to ask a question or you want to jump in with an idea or briefly share your work just for fun, feel free to unmute yourself. We're small enough where I think that would work okay.
Absolutely. And I'm probably going to start coloring in my drawing in a minute, but you get to go at your own pace. If you're still blocking out shapes or shading, that is totally okay. I just want to make sure if some people are going a little bit faster than others, I'm sort of accounting for everyone. But in terms of colored pencils or colored crayons or markers, anything that you have at home would work to be able to add color to your drawing, as long as you feel comfortable with the material and as long as you want to add color to your material. One of our examples from our PowerPoint was just a sketch with the pencil. If you want to focus 100% on pencil on your drawing, that's an option as well. I love using colored pencil. I think it's a fun medium. Sometimes you can layer it a little bit. So I will be using colored pencil for mine, but it is entirely up to you what you choose to add to yours. I usually use the shading that I did with my pencil as sort of a guide in terms of coloring it in. So for example, this area that I'm coloring in now with an orange is more of an area of light. And then the areas that I've shaded, I'll probably go in with maybe more of a red color or maybe a darker orange if I have it. And I use it as my guide for this is an area of shadow. Now, in terms of if you have limited colors too, you can also make your orange a little darker so it appears like it's more of a shadow. And again, this is where it comes in really handy. If you start off using your pencil very lightly, it lets you have more of that contrast depending on how you use it. And you can still use the layers with other colors. So, for example, I'm gonna come in with a red, and I'm gonna add it in even on top of my orange, just to give it a little more of a color to it, a little more of a contrast. And I'm gonna come back in with more orange in a minute, but just so you guys see that I can sort of layer my colors. And now I'm trying to use my colored pencils to be more true to the object in terms of color. If you wanted to shade this in shades of green, or if you had an orange and you wanted to shade in shades of green, you can. It allows you to be abstract or lifelike, either way, whichever you prefer. I think it's fun if you add perhaps some colors to it. My apple, I know, has a little tiny bit of green over here. So I'm gonna add that in. And then I'll blend it a little with the red. I tried to pick a well-lit area in my living room so that we get a little more of an obvious light or dark to my objects. If you don't have an area with a lot of natural light right now, you can also get a lamp and shine it on there just so you have more value to add to your, in terms of light and dark, to your drawing. One of the things that I found when I'm drawing is sometimes I'll take a break and I'll look side by side. Obviously this is backwards, so ignore that part. I sort of was working from the image. So, but it's good to sort of take a look at it and see the values, take a step back. Are your shapes the way you want them to be? Are your values where you want them to be in terms of light and dark? I think it's looking okay so far.
Does anybody want to jump in and share their progress so far? If not, that's okay, but we're more than happy to take a look at what you've done if you'd like to share.
I'm really curious to see what objects everyone's used. Obviously, not everyone will have the same things that I have at my house.
And you're welcome to even just type what objects you're using in the chat if you'd like to keep your video off. It'd be, like Yasmin said, it would be fun to hear what everyone's using.
So I'm going to try to make this shadow a little bit darker. And another cool thing that I like about still life too in case you don't finish your drawing today. Ideally, you might have either the same or similar objects in your house for a while. You can always come back to it. You can always add to it. Let's say in a week, I wanted to add a different background to my drawing. I can always have rearrange my objects in a way where there's maybe a window behind it that I can draw in later on. If I get a cool idea one day or something and I just want to add it to this really cool drawing and how it's turning out, that's an option for everyone.
Hey, Yasmin, we have a question from the audience.
Oh, yes.
So if you're having trouble with the edges of your objects and, you know, trying to figure out how to put them together where they overlap, do you have any tips for, you know, how to make that transition a little less awkward?
Absolutely. So when I started out and I had this apple, this orange, and this cup in the middle, I knew that my orange was more of a circular object. So I actually drew the whole circle. I don't know if you could see my adding of the circle. So this is how I started off with my orange. And then I sort of decided where the cup cut in. So I had this line right here. I hope you could see that. And then when I decided where the cup would come in and I started drawing that cylinder shape, I drew it over that part of the circle where it would cover. And then I went back in and I erased the overlap. So it helps if you have, like in this case, basic shapes that do overlap, draw them as you would normally, and then you can go back in and sort of erase any lines that don't belong that would be in the back of the foreground object. I hope that helps. That's literally how I did mine earlier when I started my sketch. Same thing with the apple. So I drew sort of where the apple would end in real life, even though it went over where the cup is in my drawing. And then I went back in, and I'll show you how I just did that. And I erased these lines so that when I went to color and shade my orange, I knew that the cup would be in front of it and those lines weren't there anymore. So
that's why it's so important to use light strokes when you're sketching and have a good eraser.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. I never thought about that, but
yeah.
Obviously that's why you're the art instructor.
And it's easy. I feel like certain people don't believe in making mistakes and using an eraser. I am not one of those people. I think if you have an eraser, you get to use it. You get to sort of make shapes incorrectly and then go back in and adjust to however you think it looks better. Also, if it comes out not looking exactly like your objects, that's the beauty of art. You get to, that's your interpretation, that's how you saw it, that's how you wanted to draw it. So there's absolutely no pressure to make it look identical to your objects in real life. The second example that we had, that Claire had in her PowerPoint, was a very abstracted still life. So it had those bananas, that teapot, and the either bread or pineapple. And that's the beauty of art. It can be interpretive. It can be your version. If someone wanted this exact still life, they could take a photograph, but we're drawing. So that means that we're putting our personal touch onto it and we're making it our own.
That's really good advice. Thank you. It's a bit of a confidence booster.
I hope so. I hope so. I hope everyone has fun with the activity because it's meant to be fun and not stressful. I don't want everyone to be stressing about making it look perfect. I want everyone to have fun and learn about shadow and light and blocking out shapes and learning how to sort of work from that. I'm gonna go back to maybe coloring. I'm gonna hopefully try this teacup. This teacup is a little challenging. It's got a lot of different colors into it, and it's got this gold pattern, and I don't have a gold pencil. So I'm actually probably gonna change that and do maybe a yellowish gold, sort of a tan color, perhaps this one, to sort of try to block out these cool designs. First, I'm going to start with the purple. And if you decide as you're working on your drawing, you know, I don't like that it's purple and gold, you can choose to do a different color. So if I wanted to make this blue and green, it's your drawing and you get to make all these cool decisions about it as you're going along. I really like purple. It's one of my favorite colors. So I am going to stick to the purple and try to make it a little true to the design, hopefully. It's a bit of a tricky design. I'm probably not gonna look identical, but I hope it still looks nice. And the color contrast will make it pop a little off the page. So I'm working on making this design. Anyone has any questions, any other questions, please feel free to interrupt me. I feel like it's very different teaching on Zoom versus seeing all of your drawings in real life and sort of getting to see at what stage you are in the drawing process. So let's see. Okay, and then later on, I'll take a brief pause from working on this teacup. One of the things that I think is really important for you to add, if you want to your drawing, is the shadow that the objects make on the surface that they're sitting on. So I have a slightly darker tone over here, and I can add the shadow that this teacup and this orange make onto the table that they're sitting on. And it sort of gives them the illusion that they're sitting in space and that they're resting on something that exists in the real world. And then eventually I'll go in and I'll probably add more details to this table. But for now, it adds another sort of dimension to my drawing. Let's see. And it helps that I'm in an area that has a lot of natural light. So the contrast for me to see it is very stark. Let's see. Awesome. I see some people used mugs in their drawings. I think that's a really neat object, and it's similar to the teacup. It has that same cylinder as a base, and then you get to add the handle, hopefully. If you don't want to add the handle, maybe it's behind, it's sort of facing away from you. But fruit, I think, is a popular choice as well. Most people have that laying around, and it's usually in a basic shape object. So you guys can see the background right here. I want to add a window to it. I want to add a window to my background, even though there is not a window there. I'm going to go off of the fact that the shadows are going in this direction. So I'm going to try to add a window maybe over here. And this is where your drawing gets to become your own. Even though it is a still life and you are working from real objects, you get to take some liberties with them.
Yasmin, we have an artist who is ready to share their work.
Oh, yes. I'm super excited.
Yeah, go ahead, Derek.
Don't worry about the pencil. All right, hold it up so they can see. Oh, okay. Hang on. The dog is chasing our colored pencil. Okay. All right, put it up there, bud.
That looks so
Oh,
awesome.
wow. Very cool.
That looks very festive considering we're in October. I think it's so wonderful.
And then can you hold up the objects so we can just see how realistic yours look? Because I feel like you did a really great job.
Absolutely.
Holy
Oh,
smokes.
wow.
You got all the yellow and orange in that little pumpkin, didn't you?
And you made the jack-o'-lantern's face very dynamic. I love it.
Here's the daddy version.
Oh, wow.
Awesome.
That's
Great job, you guys.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Are you planning on doing a second drawing, or are you going to keep working on the first one?
I'm gonna keep going. I think we may be done.
That's
okay.
totally fair.
That's what's fun about this program. I mean, you can make your still life take as little or as much time as you want. You can add whatever extras. You can leave it just as is.
Absolutely.
So great job, and thanks for joining us this morning.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us. It was fun.
Of course.
I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
Fun.
Okay. Does anyone else maybe want to share a drawing? If not, that's okay as well. I'm going to keep working on my window that I decided to add over here. Okay. Maybe I want to add a windowsill. Okay. And as you can see, I keep adding things to my drawing just to sort of maybe fill the space and add more dimensions to it, but you are free to draw as you wish. And if you want to keep working on the same objects, that is also definitely an option. I'm going to try to add. One of the things that I think is tricky to draw is glass. So this glassware as well, I think is always a little difficult to draw. Windows, showing that transparency of glass is always also a little difficult. It doesn't have to be exact. It can be your abstract interpretation of it, which is cool. Okay. Awesome. I'm going to try to work a little bit more on my teacup that I took a break from. Sometimes if you think a specific part of your drawing is challenging, it can help to go to a different part of your drawing and work on it. And then maybe when you come back to it, you have maybe a few more answers or maybe a different idea on how to approach something. That was sort of my tactic with the teacup. Trying to make it so you guys can see the design that I'm going to put on there. It's a little tricky. Let's see. Okay, I don't know if everyone can see my design. In hindsight, I could have picked a slightly less complex teacup, but I wanted it to be a little bit of a challenge, and it is definitely a challenge to draw this teacup.
Yasmin, when you have a second, can you hold the cup up to the camera
Absolutely.
so we can see the the intricacies that you're capturing?
It's very complex. It has this really cool,
Oh, wow.
it's floral, it's a floral design, and then it has these geometric shapes as well.
I see. Oh yeah, that does look tricky.
It is. I feel a little intimidated by it, but I'm trying my best, and I'm trying to make it fun with all the different colors that I'm trying to use. So that's definitely the approach that I'm trying to take for it. Oh, I put it back a little bit out of, there we go. But yeah, so yesterday I had tried to do a drawing, and I used just a plain glass container. And I actually found that to be equally as tricky with no design on it whatsoever, because the background played such a critical role in drawing it. Because it was clear, it sort of almost reflected the things that were behind it, and also light at the same time. So that was tricky as well. So I figured today I would try one with a complicated design just to see how the differences were in drawing it. Both have been tricky, both have been challenging, but both have been enjoyable to draw. So switch colors. There we go. And even though the same purple is on the top and on the bottom, I decided to use two different purples. Decided to switch it up a little bit. Throwing in some red, some dark red. And then I'm not going to spend too much time on the design that's in this little window right here. I'm just sort of giving the illusion that there's a design there with some scribbles. But the cool thing about it is that when you look at it from further away, it looks like it fits in with the design. So it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to look how you want it to look. And if it looks a little bit different than the cup to me, that's okay. And then the inside of the cup, if anyone has a mug or some sort of cylinder like this one, the thing that I also find tricky is doing the inside, like this little part that shows at the top of the cup. So I'm gonna try to do my best to take a look at it, but it can be a little tricky. And what I'm doing is, in effect, this is the, and I'm gonna try to show you, this is the lip of the cup. And I'm trying to outline it in black for you guys. And the design, the purple design right below this, sort of mimics that same shape. So I'm actually gonna try to draw almost the same shape, but slightly below it, to see if that gives the illusion that that design is going around the entire cup, including the back part of it that you can't really see, except for this top area. And I'm gonna block out the shape of the cup. I don't know if anyone can see that. So I made it a little darker. So in order for it to match some of the darker tones down here, I'm actually gonna press a little bit harder on my colored pencil and try to make it match throughout, a little bit more consistent. Okay, let's see. And I'm gonna add some of that same gold sort of just in the back here. I'm doing it even a little bit lighter than the gold tan color I did here, just to sort of make it look like it's a little further away. And that's kind of a neat trick. If you make it a little less sharp, it sort of looks like it's further back in space than the things that are more in focus. So that's sort of the trick that I'm trying to use there. Okay. After doing a little bit more of that teacup, it wasn't as challenging as I thought it would be. I think it turned out okay. I think I just needed to take it one step at a time. And that's a good tactic if one of your objects might seem a little difficult to draw. If you take one aspect of it at a time, it sort of helps you move along through the object without seeing how tricky it might be. Okay. And I think I'm also going to outline my window a little bit darker so it stands out, but not too dark because it's in the background of these objects. So I want it to be, like I just said, a little bit out of focus. So it almost seems like the viewer isn't going to focus too much on the window. It's just going to be a background object. Okay. And I think I'm also going to add a couple details to my fruit. We have this little top part of the orange and this little shadow right here. And this top part of this apple. Let me see, yeah. I didn't use a lot of too heavy outlines. I only used my regular pencil to outline my objects. If you want to make them stand out a little bit more from your paper, you can also go back in with a darker pencil and outline them a little heavier if you wanted. It makes them pop out a little bit more from the background paper. See the difference? So the apple, I just used a regular pencil, and then I outlined my orange in this black pencil to sort of give it a little bit more contrast. And let's see. I'm gonna come in with my eraser. So I gave these two lines over here on the side of my still life sort of the illusion that they're on a table. I think I want to color my table green. My table is not green, but I'm going to color it green anyway. I think it's going to give a really cool contrast to my still life. Just a little light green just to give it some color. It's very light. It's actually really hard to see on the video, but I will hold it up in just a second.
I think that'll really pick up on some of those light green highlights in your apple too, to sort of make the picture feel even more cohesive.
Exactly. So hold on, I'm going to hold it up in just a second. Okay. It's actually really light. I might make it a little bit darker so it's easier to see. Hang on one more second. That's the trickiness of colored pencil. Plus, I usually always try to start out really light with it so I can change my mind. But I don't think I'm going to change my mind too much, so I'm going to color it in a little bit darker. And I went over the part that is shadow, so it looks like the shadow is part of the table as well. All right, let's see if that's a little bit better. So see it, I made that a little bit darker too, just because I think this green is a very light lime green. Okay,
That
and
looks really neat. And it's a good way to show how you can layer sort of levels of color, you know, more easily with colored pencil than, you know, with like crayon or marker or something like that. It allows you a lot more freedom to make colors as dark as you want over time.
absolutely. I think marker is definitely tricky. Crayon, I think, might layer a little better than marker, but colored pencil is always my go-to. I think it layers very well. To me, it almost mimics paint in the way that you can layer different colors and sort of mix them, if you will. But I really enjoy the way that colored pencil, depending on how hard you press, is how dark or light your line is going to come out. And I think that's one of the things I really enjoy about colored pencil. And I think I'm going to add a little bit more to my window. Hope everyone's doing good with their drawings. I hope everything's coming out the way you want it to be with your still life.
Are you folks working still on your objects, or have any of you moved on to the background, or maybe, you know, a table or a window like Yasmin has done in her drawing?
Awesome. So I'm just adding a little more color to my window. If I want to, I can also add a tree maybe outside. I already colored it, so I think I'm going to leave my window as is, and I might go back into my orange and try to highlight some things. Oh, Pamela, you're starting to do the background. That's awesome. Let's see, I might add a little highlight. So the tricky thing about colored pencil, especially when you want to do an area of highlight, the white is on the white background, can't see anything. So I'm using white on this white background and it just doesn't come up. If I have a color underneath it, sometimes it helps a little bit, but even that is a little tricky. So what I usually do is I try to make the areas around that highlight darker. Just because in this, when I'm using white paper and a white pencil, it just doesn't come out the way that I want it to. So that's what I'm going to try to do now. I'm actually going to add a little bit more orange around that area of highlight so that that area looks lighter. What the white pencil actually ends up doing is blending the pencil that I had on underneath it. Let me see if I can show it to you. So this right there is where I put the white pencil. It actually ended up blending that orange into a little bit lighter, but not by much, not enough to where I want that highlight to be. So I'm actually going to go back and make the area around it a little bit darker. I think I might make my shadows a little bit darker as well. Hope everyone can see. And with pencil, you can go over it as many times as you want to sort of try to get that effect. Can be a little tricky with the highlighting. For the apple, the advantage of it is I had that green in the apple perfectly lined up with where that highlight is. So I actually ended up using a green instead of the white, but I could also add some white to it, and it'll make the green a little bit lighter so it can be more readable as a highlight. So I added white to that green. You can barely tell, but it does blend that area a little bit better. And now I'm gonna add a little bit more red to my apple, to the areas that I think perhaps could be a little bit darker, so that it's a little more readable. Okay, and here, I'm gonna add a little bit of brown too. It's a little darker on the bottom. And some more to my shadow. So the shadow over here at the bottom is actually now 3 different colors. It's a dark gray, almost black color. I layered the lime green on it, and now I'm layering a little bit of brown. And you can see it changes sort of how the shadow is on the table. And it made it a little bit darker. And I think I'm gonna add also some darker tones to that gold. That cup, I think it's not standing out the way that I want it to, so I can always go back in and make it a little darker just so it's a little more visible. Let me see if I have a slightly darker color. I don't think I do. I think I'm going to use the brown layered on that yellow color to try to do that. So maybe that pops out a little bit more. So I colored this one and this one, but not this one yet with this brown. You can see there's a little bit of a difference. And we can add that. I think that definitely stands out a little bit more.
That looks great.
Thank you. And I think this is going to be, at least for my drawing, the stopping point for me. And I'm going to sort of go over very, very briefly sort of my whole process to get here, if that's okay. Just
that's wonderful. And I'm going to put a link in the chat to the Zimmerli's Art at Home website. So if you feel like making another still life, you are welcome to visit that site. We'll be posting instructions and the video from today, so you can use those to help you create another drawing. There's also some other fun resources up there as well. So yeah, carry on.
Awesome. So sort of as a conclusion to how I did everything and how I got to this drawing, I first picked out my still life objects and sort of arranged them the way I wanted to. Then I blocked out some basic shapes. I started out, for example, with a circle for the orange, a circle for the apple, and then I sort of started making sure that they looked similar to what it looks like on my table. A cylinder, obviously, for my teacup. And then with still my regular drawing pencil, by the way, I usually use a softer drawing pencil. It's personal preference, though. I started adding in some shadow to my objects before I went in with my colored pencil and continued sort of adding both color and shadow to those objects. Eventually I decided I wanted to add this window. So even though there is not a window back there, I definitely added it in, and I added a little bit more to my background, some shadows, and that's sort of how I got here. And I hope you enjoyed drawing a still life at home, and I hope you enjoyed the process. And I hope you perhaps came away learning a little bit something about maybe shading or blocking out shapes and drawing.
Yeah, I think this was great. I'm so excited that, you know, people came out to participate with us. And we have 2 more Art Together sessions with Yasmin. November 7th, it's also the first Saturday at 10 a.m. And then December, I believe, let me check my calendar. Yes, December 5th, the first Saturday of December at 10 a.m. So next month, we're going to be working on collage. And then in December, we are going to be doing something creative around the theme of snow.
A little different.
A little bit different, a little more abstract. But in both, we'll see some works from the museum's collection. And yeah, we hope you enjoyed and learned something new, and stay well, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
And thank you so much for joining us, and we really enjoyed having you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.